This agency today proudly announces its approval of this major new drug. By our estimates, this drug will save over 8.
If the government approves a drug that will start saving lives tomorrow, then how many people died yesterday waiting for the government to act? Shouldn't we?
FDA's mindset, in a very large sense, has been shaped by the thalidomide tragedy. And while that certainly was a deadly tragedy, it was FDA, but by the old FDA, the FDA pre-1962, before it had its powers greatly expanded. In a sense, thalidomide, having been another.
Give us some examples. I know you brought the cardio pump. Why don't you show us that and tell us about it?
That's a good thing to start with. This is a 1.5-pound device. Chile to Japan and China saves lives. In this country, it's illegal.
And perhaps some policy changes.
Congressman Barton is the new chairman of a subcommittee overseeing the Competitive Enterprise Institute, a pro-business organization, announced an anti-FDA media campaign.
Then how many people died?
Full certification.
Meanwhile, the Washington Legal Foundation is continuing its fight against what it calls overregulation. And the drug industry...
And more quickly and probably less expensively outside of a government.
Senator Connie Mack also wants to see changes.
For the government to be saying to people, oh, we're not going to let you experiment with this because it might kill you. I mean, Michael was struggling for his life.
Pretending the FDA isn't doing a good job and trying to privatize it in the hands of people that are going to damage the public, strengthen the FDA.
In 1994. Jeff Levine, CNN reporting.
And the welfare reform, but not so much about consumer issues. Our consumer correspondent Hattie Kaufman is here in the studio for once with a preview of the issues. What does a Republican Congress mean for the average consumer? Well, as with many things in Washington these days, that depends on whom you're listening to. But one thing
I got into politics because I was a small businessman inundated by these regulations. So as far as the Constitution.
Representative Tom DeLay, the new Republican whip, is leading the fight to start rolling back federal regulation of business. He feels decades of Democratic control have led to a regulation mania that stifles business and forces consumers to pay more for goods and services.
The pendulum has gone so far to the left that we're doing outrageous things. I mean, we are claiming that children's teeth are hazardous waste, and because of that, dentists have to treat them in a special way that drives up the cost of the dentist office.
Another area of regulation mania, according to the Republicans, is the environment. Terrence Scanlon, the head of the Consumer Safety Commission during the Reagan years, says we can expect to see the spotted owl making headlines again.
Things like the Endangered Species Act, which, without question, hurts the national economy, hurts job creation, all for a spotted owl. We're losing our competitiveness as a result of the amount of regulation that we have in the country.
DeLay has proposed the Regulatory Transition Act. which would force the Clinton administration to put a moratorium on all new regulation until the end of June. That would give Congress a chance to review what's already on the books and decide what's worth keeping.
Imagine, that's like saying in the area of crime in the streets, let's put a moratorium on the police policing the streets until we figure out whether the police are behaving themselves.
Ralph Nader believes that no matter how much the Republicans say it's the consumer they're looking out for, it's really big business they want to help.
We have federal cops on the corporate beat. They're supposed to be protecting people who have pensions, small investors, people who are exposed to hazards in the workplace, marketplace, and environment. This is law and order for corporations. This is exactly what the Republicans want to destroy.
Democratic Representative Joseph Kennedy feels you can sum up the Republican philosophy in a nutshell.
That's it. Cut all the regulations, hand the reins over to big business, and let them run themselves. I think if we do that, there are going to be a lot of not just poor people, but ordinary working folks in America, blue-collar citizens in America, who are going to end up feeling very abused by the powerful interests of this country.
Conservative think tanks have joined the battle, saying concerns for public safety have been taken to absurd extremes. This anti-regulation commercial, which takes the Food and Drug Administration to task for delays in approving drugs, was produced by the Competitive Enterprise Institute.
If the government approves a drug that will start saving lives tomorrow, then how many people died yesterday waiting for the government to act? Shouldn't we know the answer to that before we start applauding?
How far will it go? Do you see the Clean Air Act being repealed?
Well, I introduced a bill to repeal the Clean Air Act. I don't think we'll be able to repeal the Clean Air Act this year, or maybe not even next year, but we're starting the dialogue.
Kennedy hopes the Republicans will stick to that kind of position, a kind he thinks Americans will find too extreme.
If that really is their agenda, I think that Bill Clinton will get reelected as president, and I think we'll have a chance of resurrecting a pro-consumer agenda here in the Congress.
This fight has constitutional ramifications as well. The president may well argue that Congress has no right to restrict the regulations put out by agencies of the executive branch. Separation of powers.
The Republicans, though, certainly aren't talking about doing away with all regulations.
Money on meeting all these regulations, then theoretically prices go down.
Theoretically.